Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Just Blazor Programming. Today, we're going to be discussing how to customize your policies. In my last video with the admin tutorial, if you have not checked it out, check it out because this will be an extension to that one. Normally, I hate doing these kinds of videos where you have to do some homework before, but that's how it is in this one because this is how to create your customized policies. Now, the use of a customized policy is now that you can demarcate your code not just with roles, but with claims, and you could even do logic within those claims in order to make your web application more robust. So yeah, that's what we'll be doing today. And no, in a change of pace, Microsoft has actually written a pretty decent document. We might go over that a little bit later when it comes to this. So we'll be following that about 90%, and we'll add a little bit of our own 10% uniqueness to it in order for me to teach it to you, or what I feel like would teach it to you in the most clearest way possible. Because you know those Microsoft docs, oh my god, they're infamous in these parts. Anyways, let's begin. So what is this? This is just a basic Blazor application, but I am going off of the tutorial one that I did in the admin tutorial. So yes, this is an extension to it, and if you haven't done it, you might get a little lost. So in this case, I'm actually going to use the exact same database that we created, and I already have some data in there. So I'm not going to really go over, the whole relationship between the claims and the roles and all that stuff. I think I did a pretty, a really thorough job in the last one. We're just going to be going over the customized policies, but in order to do that, we do need to add some more claims. So if you have not had, so if you've done that last one, here we go. So before we get started, I want you to pick whatever user you want that exists here in your data table for the ASP.NET users. I'm going to choose test number 3 because I already had this all set up. And then you want to go to your ASP.NET user claims in order to add claims against it. So I added a few extra claims in here. I think in the first video, I added only one claim in order to show you, how to do the whole separate your code for different roles, different policies, claims, and all that stuff. And we're gonna give this guy multiple claims that include his age, something I call certified, and something called certified number of years. Don't worry, this will make sense later on. And when we get into the customized policies, you will understand. But these policies work off these claims here because the problem is that roles are very static. You will only really check against whether you have a role or not, or if you have a specific role associated with your user account in order for you to give them the permission to do something on the site. But with claims, you could be a little bit more robust, and with policies specifically, you can have a better, you can actually add logic and stuff into it. So that's why this is actually pretty important to learn. And it's not just limited to Blazor, this is ASP.NET Core. So even though this is how Blazor Server is going to be using their claims and how to implement authorization, you will be probably using this in any other ASP.NET Core application that you encounter. That's just not Blazor only. So it's really more of an ASP.NET Core thing than Blazor, but we are doing this in a Blazor application. This is the one that I used in that last video. Anyways, in order for us to get started, I want you to go to your program.cs file. And in your program.cs file, I want you to add something like this. Builder.services.add authorization, because your policies are part of the authorization part of the whole system. Oops. And now we do an options here. We want to do the brackets here, semicolon. And now we can start adding policies. So I believe in the last one, I had a policy that was actually this one. I call it admin policy, and all it did is look for the claim that you needed was the admin claim. So this, you do not need to do anything special. This is how it just works out of the box. So that is not a customized policy. And we're not going to be focusing on that. I'm just going to leave it there for posterity, I guess. This, on the other hand, is a customized policy. So this is actually straight up from the example that is given in Microsoft's documents. So if we go here, we're actually using this example, the at least 21 example. And we're actually going to follow this here. So what it's asking you to do is make sure you implement a class that has the Authorization requirement interface. So you're going to see what this means. It's actually not very complicated. And apart from a few, rough steps that maybe, because it doesn't really go as smoothly as I would like it, it's not a paint by numbers kind of thing. It is rather simple to understand if you want to follow it from here. But you don't have to, because I'm going to be doing this exact same thing. So obviously we're going to need a minimum requirement class. And normally you would have these separated, you need two components, the authorization requirement component and handler, in order to add, and a handler class in order to add all these into it. And normally you would want to separate them into their own folders, but we're going to be a little lazy and a little bit more simple for this one, and we're going to put it all in one. The first thing, after you've added your add authorization portion here in program.cs, and if you have not, make sure you associate your database to your ASP.NET JSON file. Basically, you haven't done the first video, do that first. And I'll just assume you've done that. So here in the Blazor app, we want to add a new, we want to add a new, we want to add a new folder and call it policy. I'm just going to call it policy. Policy. Here we go. That's where we're going to be sticking all of these new classes that have to do with the policies that we're going to read, the new custom policies. So this is one of them. This is going to be a singleton policy, a single policy that you can create that is not, that doesn't have to do, doesn't have any other factors to it. You don't have to do much in order to get this minimum age requirement. It only focuses on one specific policy, or one specific claim or something like that. So in order to do that, get rid of that, we're going to create the minimum requirement class within our policy. Go here, we add a new item, class. So the name of this is minimum age requirement. I should have copy pasted it before, but it's fine. I have it on the other screen. Life hacks, am I right? Minimum age requirement.cs. Perfect. Now we have this. And now we have to add this package up here. Authorization package first. And then on the minimum age requirement, we want to add the actual authorization requirement interface as it says here and implement that interface. And if you don't know what an interface is, I don't know what to tell you, man. What I'm doing is just implementing the interface and making sure we have a public facing variable here. So now we could actually push in a value for minimum age, and then that will do some math for us later on. So in order to make this work, we got to make sure we import this. So just do that. It's just up here now. It is in a different folder. So now we have a very simple policy with our minimum age required being 18. So we're not done yet. This is just the requirement part. Now we have a handler that goes along with it. So every custom policy you want to make has to have two components, basically a minimum age requirement and a handler, as a rule of thumb. We're going to go into how to do multiple, another way of doing this for multiple variables, but not yet. So here we're going to add another class, basically. And in this class, we're going to add the actual handler piece. So this handler is going to be the one that actually handles the code you want to write, the actual logic of everything that has to do with it. So this is part of the authorization. We're going to import you're going to see. First, we have to import a few libraries here. We want this authorization library again, but this time for the handler, we're going to use the authorization handler class instead. But Microsoft had it like this, so We actually need to do this instead. Make sure you add the minimum age requirement class in there. That's gonna connect the two. And now we're gonna have to implement what we're missing here, which is actually the protected override class. So I am gonna just copy paste and go over what I did. This might be going a little too fast for you, but if not, that here, make sure that you guys can see it. I think you guys can see most of that. Here we go. So within here, all I did was added the handler requirement function. And in here, that's going to pass the context and our actual class, basically. So what we're doing is we're going to go into the user because we need to make sure we could find their claims that are associated with it. Now, we did create a claims called age, and that's what we want. For me, I didn't use age as a year. I use age as a number. Age is just a number after. No, it's not. No, it's not. Anyone who's out there who doesn't believe. In this case, I just used this number 18 to denote the years instead of using, let's say, 1992 or something. Or 2022 or whatever. Because I didn't want to do all the calculations that you need to do in order to do the date time. In fact, I believe that example is done here for you. So if you want to do it that way, you can. You just have to go through all of this. I just simplified it to only just make it into a number and getting rid of all this. But you can do all your calculations here or your logic here. So if you feel like using the actual year way of doing it, you can. All I did was make sure that I do a very simple if your age that you get from here is more than or equal to the requirement age. It's essentially just what you're doing that at the end of the day. But if you have extra logic or stuff that you want to do, you can do it. In fact, we're going to go into more complicated logic in a bit in this very video. But in this case, it's fairly simple. We just parse that into an int, and then we just compare it to the minimum age. In this case, is 18. And if it succeeds, make sure you give the context. Make sure you give this the authorization handler context. The succeed. Say that it succeeded, basically. The requirement has succeeded, and then your task is complete. This is an asynchronous. Oh, it's not actually. No. Oh, yeah, it is. Here it is. It's an asynchronous call. I almost scared myself. But that's all you really need to do. And these are basically the two most important pieces to it. However, there is one other piece that if you want your claims to actually work, you have to instantiate it here. You see how everything else has like an add scoped or add singleton because this is how you add your services. You have to also add the policy as well here if you're creating a custom one like this one. So it's fairly simple. I'm just doing another copy paste job as well. Here you import your thing. You import this authorization library here. And here we go. So now we have our policy, the at least 18 policy that is our custom policy. It has logic associated with it inside its handler that we have created and have instantiated according to the authorization handler, and then whatever the object that we're passing through it. This time the class being the minimum age requirement class. That's the requirement that you need. Do whatever you have to do here because we're basing this off a claim. So we want the claim through this, which is associated to this down here. And then you do all your logic here. So basically it's looking for a success. I don't think you could have this return fail if you want, but I'd rather just do it this way. Sometimes if it's a null, you please make sure you take care of your nulls when it comes to your values here. You need a way to deal with all that. If not, it's going to break at some point. So you don't want that to happen. That's why you have to do a null check, and then you can do everything else. So in this case, it's pretty simple. There's only one requirement. It's only really dealing with one value within this policy. That. So how do we test this out? Well, I'm going to go to something that exists already. Go to this counter here. And we're going to apply this the way we normally would apply it, like in the other video that I did. By adding an attribute here. So the attribute is going to be authorized policy at least 18. This is the name of the policy I created. Where is it? Right here. What you gotta do is add that to this, and that will only allow people with this policy associated with them to access this page. So this is the counter page. So I will also, I'll leave it there. Actually, I'm not gonna do the whole authorization view thing. We're gonna make it easy. So in this case, I actually already have a user available. So if you haven't done so, please make sure that your users have claims associated with them. In my case, is a user that already existed in the other video. So he's still logged in. So I'm able to access it. So if I try logging out, see, not authorized. I logged out, so I don't no longer have access to the claims. My counter is trying to check to see if this policy matches with me, and now I am no longer authorized. And in case you don't believe me, I'm gonna update my age here. And your claim type and your claim values are both strings. So you have to make sure if you need to do any sort of math to them, you have to parse them into whatever the whatever arithmetic you want to use, whatever the type you're gonna use, should I say. Ooh, like this. Update set that claim value ID is equal to that should switch up. Now, if I try to log in as this user who has a claim that's associated with his age as 15 instead of 18, scary enough. I try to go into the counter, I'm no longer authorized. So as you can see, the actual claims is actually working because it's doing the whole test and everything. And because I want to feel more comfortable, I'm going to put this back to 18. Make sure nothing suspicious happens. You know what I mean? Can't be too careful out there. So now we're back to normal. Now, that was just one way of creating a custom policy. The other way of creating custom policy, the other type of custom policy that ASP.NET Core handles is using for multiple requirements. Now, this was just a single requirement. It's only looking for the at least one, at least whatever my age is, and it's only taking the one value as well. You can add multiple values in here, but it won't let you do multiple times the logic here. To do that, you need to do something special. You have to create another handler to handle multiple cases. So I have an example of that now, and we're going to get into it. It's actually very simple to how we did it here. So in this case, we don't really need. We're going to add another policy that will handle all this. So in this case, I'm going to add this policy. Now this just means that I'm going to check against, I want to check against these two values and this one at the same time. Now, you can do this without it, but the whole reason why you want to do multiple requirements is if you need to do something like an OR. You can't really do ORs here because it's a lot more annoying. Let me see what Microsoft has to say about it real quick. So here is the reason why you would want to do a multiple handlers for a requirement. Is when you want to do this on an OR basis. You can't really do it with a single requirement. You have to, if you want multiple requirements to say, oh, you're 18 or you have a license or something, this is how you do it. You have to do the multiple handler way. And that's what we're going to get into now. So in our multiple handler, we have to do what we did before and create our handlers. In this case, I'm trying to create something called certified minimum requirement. This will be our multiple handler. So just in case, multiple requirement policy. Make sure we don't get confused. And this is our single requirement. So in order to do this, we have to do the same thing that we did before. We're going to create the custom minimum requirement here. So here, we're going to add that. C#. Certified minimum requirement. Perfect. And we will do the exact same thing we did with the other ones and start adding all the libraries and the interface that we need to add. Oh, 1 second. Here we go. So again, add your libraries. Add the interface. So we inherit. Get the constructor. This is the constructor that I've chosen. And yeah, you have to also add the values. Make sure they're public facing. So in this case, I want 2 values coming in. The 2 values are going to be the certified value and the certified number of years. That will reflect these two. Certified is going to be true, which is going to be our Boolean when we grab it and we parse it. And then certified number is 5, which is another integer. So yeah, so just remember, if you're doing it this way, that at some point you're bringing a string, and then that string has to be converted later on. So that is for our minimum requirement. Now we're going to add the other one, the certified minimum handler. So that would require us to do another one of these. Oh, the reason why I keep looking back, because I don't want to cover the bottom side of my face. So if you see me looking that way, is because I'm trying to check to make sure that's not happening. There we go. Certified minimum handler. Okay. All right. And we're going to do the same thing we did last time with the handler. Add your libraries that we need. It's usually a nice idea to use system for arithmetic and stuff like that. And authorization, we're going to add it here. There you go. Now in this case, we actually do not have to add the actual class, and I'm not too sure why in this case we don't, but just follow it. Just go with the flow. So we're gonna actually use the handle async class here, and I ate a bracket. So let me so now we're gonna fill this in with what we need in order to implement this new policy. So this is basically following the Microsoft Docs to the letter, except that when I do my actual logic is going to be a little bit different than this, but this is one of the more important parts here. The requirements that we get from this context is going to be what we loop through. So you'll see what I mean soon enough. But here we go. So we're gonna go loop through every requirement here in order to make sure that that when we have multiple requirements, you should loop through them. And then we start doing an if statement per each requirement, depending on the actual requirement here. So we're going to be using this the minimum handler, minimum age requirement within this one. So show you that you can use other requirements you've created here and implement them within your multiple requirement policy. That'll make more sense once I actually dig into it. So we'll first add the new policy that I want to create, the new requirement, in this case for the certified minimum requirement. in order to do all of that, you need to make sure that that you do the if statement and you convert it, and you make sure that it is the right type. So in this case, this is a certified minimum requirement. I believe that is why we don't have one up here, because we have multiple types coming in this case too. The certified minimum requirement type, and then we're going to have the minimum age requirement. So once this is established that this is what we're looking for, we do a we basically cast this as this model, and within the context we do the same thing that we did in the first one, where we're looking for certain claims and to get their values basically. So we're getting two values in this case, the certified and certified number of years. So that's what we have here, certified number of years. We're going to be getting back a true and a 5. So in order to use these values once we've gotten them from the context, we need to go and do a try parse. So, Boolean try parse, whatever the value is, you got to put it in its in an out variable here. And then I already set them up basically, so you don't have to do this if you don't want to. You can just use parse, but I would rather be safe and use try parse. And then we inevitably get our values the way we want them. A Boolean value and an integer. And that's what I'm checking for. If you're both certified and you have more than or equals to 5 years of whatever the arbitrary thing I made up is. And that is what will make up this policy. I could put an or here, so now we have the two values to compare it to. But that's not all that I'm going to do. We are also going to check on a different one, which is the minimum requirement. So it's going to look exactly like the other one. In fact, it's going to be the exact same logic, except I'm going to do something a little bit different to it. So in my case, the only difference is that I put the context to fail. We're using the same age. We're still casting it to the minimum age requirement class. And down here, I am parsing it to, I'm using an in parse here. No real difference. I know there's going to be a value anyway. So in this case, we're getting our age, and then I'm going to multiply it by 7 because this is dog years now, because I decided to change this to dog years for no reason, but just to really show you that you could do arithmetic and stuff in here. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to have a certified requirement, minimum requirement, and minimum age requirements. We have two different requirements in one policy, and that's how you implement them. Just make sure that you have your requirements written already somewhere in order to reference them later on. And then finally, as you can see, we still are not done yet. We need to finish this off with a return, because it is expecting something down here. Expecting this to make sure that your task is completed, as this is a task type. So now with this special one, we can undo what we did here. And just like what we did here, we have to add another service specific to this one. So now that we have completed that, let us do that again. But this time we're gonna be we're gonna go back to the, I don't want to use counter again. Instead, we're gonna go to where it says fetch data. I'm gonna add the attribute here instead. And I'm gonna add it to, the name is expert certified in 18. That's what we want to do. We're gonna add that. So in one case, we're using the original minimum requirement, which says that I need to be 18. The number has to be 18 here. In this case, is multiplying the number by 7. So I'm gonna put that to 3 and test that out. So what I expect is that this will work in getting into one of them, which is going to be the weather forecast one, and it's not going to work in getting into counter. If I apply myself as the test 3, which is the one that has all these claims associated with them. because I have certified true and I have this as number 5. And we could play with them in order to see the thing in action. Also log out if you can before you start running these tests, because it will just keep the whatever you had already in the browser. So you don't want that. Do a proper test. So sorry everybody for the abrupt cut, but I need to go back and do something. I forgot one little thing. You see where we have the context of succeed? We have to go and make sure that we have a fail condition. If we don't, then if it doesn't hit here, it's not going to fail it, so you'll have access to it, essentially. The only time I think it will ever fail it if you don't have any authorized users. Because every user here is authorized in the sense that they exist in the system, it's going to default back to the original policy, which is that if you are an authorized user who exists in the system, regardless of whatever the policy is, you're just going to succeed. So if you want to avoid that and make sure you actually have these requirements that are being actually enforced, you have to make sure to add the context that fail wherever you're doing the final, like the check. So inside my minimum handler, make sure you add an else context that fail. And the same thing in the certified handler as well. There are 2 places where you want this. Within the minimum requirement one, after the you do the age stuff, and then obviously after here where you do the is certified or you're certified stuff as well. Just make sure you do that. Let's continue. So now we have this guy. Remember, I changed his age to 3 down here. So I shouldn't be allowed here, and I should be allowed here. So let's see. Not authorized, perfect. And I'm authorized here. The reason why I'm authorized here is because I set, whatever the age is times 7. And as long as you're over the minimum requirement age, you're fine. Therefore, we're good to go. So it looks for the minimum requirement age that we set, which in the beginning was 18. Up here. So the minimum requirement age has to be set somewhere. And as long as it's set somewhere, you're basically good to go. And if you don't believe me, see that? We have 18 there. I don't know if you can actually see it. Let me check. There's 18 in case you can't see it. That's because we were setting it already somewhere. As long as you have that set somewhere, you're good to go. In our case, we set it up way before. So you don't have to have all like the values here, obviously. I showed you that you don't need that. You could just have them in 2 different places and set up these requirements somewhere. As long as you have this set up somewhere, wherever, really, as long as it's here somewhere, you're good. Let me go back here real quick. Yep, it's all you gotta do. This is all it takes to make a custom policy. Now, this might not seem like a really crazy skill to have, but your roles are very limiting, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later about roles and just how necessary they are in the future, or right now actually, when you can do all of this with policies. Policies basically fulfill the same place as roles. You could have roles within policy, and you can do far more with policies, and it's also easier to change. So if I ever wanted to change this policy for whatever reason, all I have to do is go to one place and do my changes there, and then wherever my policies are in the code, it all gets changed at once, instead of it being a role where I have to go and manually change every role to whatever I want. Which is why typically people have your roles. Let's say you have multiple roles, you wrap them up in policies so that if you want to add more roles to a policy, you can, and you don't have to do that. Which begs the question,
do I really need a role in the first place? But that's a different topic for a different time. And this was all about how to make your custom policies. And I think this was pretty much it. That's just what the Microsoft docs say. And honestly, it's one of the more easier to read documents. I'm sure there were some parts of it that I got a little confused over, but once you smooth it out, you could basically do whatever you want. You're allowed to work with the logic as you want, so you are very free to do any kind of algorithm that you wish in order to enforce your policies and stuff like that. And as long as you're working with claims, you could either work with it with other things like OpenID or OAuth or something, where you only have claims to work with. So you're not limited to just the individual account thing. But that's all there is to it. I hope you enjoyed my custom policy example. This was, I'll put the link for the doc in there as well. And then next time we'll go over some roles or something. We're going to still be on this authorization authentication trip for a while because I still have not even touched WebAssembly. And I have to do that too before I can move on and do something a little bit different. So expect that in the future. Anyways, like, subscribe. Let me know what you think. Peace out.